messages to different groups of people in this country. I can't tell you how much I sympathize with the way everybody has had to endure this.
Just a few years into his reign, King Charles III has officially passed the torch to his son, Prince William, and daughter-in-law, Catherine. In a move both unexpected and momentous, the monarch said, "My reign ends now," signaling the dawn of a bold new chapter for the British monarchy. But was Charles ready to relinquish the throne? Could William and Kate be the modern monarchs the world was waiting for? Join us as we unravel why King Charles decided to take such a shocking decision. King Charles' illness. Behind the shining lights of royal events and perfectly worded press releases, a very different story was quietly unfolding. King Charles had been secretly fighting a much more serious illness than the public ever knew. Months ago, the palace had shared a calm statement saying the king was getting treatment, taking time to rest, and staying hopeful. But behind palace walls, the truth was much darker. It started with small signs. He seemed more tired than usual, missed a few official events, gave shorter speeches, and left early. But those closest to him saw more worrying changes, a slight tremble in his hand, and the way he swayed if he stood for too long. Soon, secret hospital visits were added to his schedule, hidden between royal duties. Eventually, doctors gave a quiet, heartbreaking diagnosis: cancer. And it wasn't the kind that gave much time. The moment everything changed came on a cold afternoon at Sandringham. After weeks of fading strength, Charles collapsed during a private meeting. He sank into a chair before anyone could help. The only person there was Prince William. That moment broke through the carefully guarded royal image. That night, doctors told the family the harsh truth. His illness was moving faster than they had feared. "You have months, not years," they said, "as a king and as a man." The next morning, Charles called William to his private room. No guards, no aides, just father and son. Charles sat quietly, looking at a photo of his grandchildren. "I want to be there for them," he said softly. "I want to see them grow, while I still can." What made the decision even more painful was Catherine. She had just turned a corner in her own cancer battle. Watching her struggle and recover had deeply moved Charles. It filled him with pride, but also sorrow. He knew the country couldn't handle two royals fighting the same private war. A senior aide said the king finally accepted that he couldn't both lead a country and fight for his life. So he made the choice. Not out of weakness, but out of love. Love for his family. And for the time, he couldn't buy back. The hardest conversation came later, not at the palace, but at Highgrove, in Charles's private study. The room smelled faintly of wood polish and old books. Over the years, it has seen political meetings, family talks, and quiet thinking. But that day, it witnessed something far more personal. William arrived in the late afternoon. The staff had already been sent home. The silence in the house was no accident. Charles stood by the window, looking out at the garden he had spent decades growing. He didn't turn when William came in. "You can't just walk away from the crown, Father," William said, tense. "Not like this. The country still needs you." Charles stayed quiet for a moment. Then he turned, and for the first time in years, William didn't see the king. He saw a tired man, nearly at his limit. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes red. When he tried to speak, his voice broke. "I'm not walking away," Charles whispered. "I'm choosing what little time I have left." Tears rolled down his face. "Every morning, I wonder if I'll make it through the day without falling. I can't be the king this country deserves anymore. But I can still be a grandfather." He looked William in the eyes. "I need to see my grandchildren grow up. That's all I want." William clenched his jaw. his heart was torn between duty and love. The king in him wanted to follow tradition, but the son in him remembered his mother's fading voice, remembered how grief had already stolen too much time, and now it threatened to do it again. Then Catherine stepped into the room. She didn't choose a side. She didn't say much. She just reached for William's hand, grounding him with her quiet strength. That small act shifted everything. William's eyes filled with tears. His voice shook. "All right," he said, "I'll do it, but not for the crown. For you." So, was the decision made through ceremony, a royal speech, or through a promise? Let's find out. The emotional speech. The Blue Drawing Room had seen many important moments, but never one like this. It was the same room where Queen Elizabeth used to give her calm and cheerful Christmas speeches, lit by soft holiday lights. But today the mood was very different. The chandeliers glowed above a quiet, serious event. Cameras were ready, the curtains were closed. Only a few trusted aides stood nearby, silent and tense. The stillness in the room felt heavy, as if everyone knew history was about to shift. King Charles stood in the center, just below a large portrait of his mother. His hands shook slightly as he opened the parchment in front of him. Normally calm, his voice trembled with emotion. Looking straight into the camera, eyes shiny with unshed tears, he began to speak. "I have carried the duties of service and tradition for most of my life," he said. "But now it's time to hand over that responsibility." He stopped, gathering himself for the next line. "I am abdicating the throne." At first, no one reacted. The words were too powerful to take in right away. Then, from behind the camera, a quiet sob broke the silence. Even the most seasoned palace staff, men who had served for decades, wiped away tears they never expected to shed. Charles kept going, slowly and carefully. "I name Prince William and his wife Catherine as my successors. They will take on all royal responsibilities, starting immediately." With those words, centuries of tradition were broken. There would be no slow handover, no long wait, just a sudden, clean decision. A father giving the crown to his son. To those truly listening, this speech wasn't just formal. It carried deep sadness and urgency. "My time," he said, "is now measured not in years but in moments." That line hit hard. It was a quiet truth hidden behind a polished speech. Charles wasn't stepping down because of politics or pressure. He was running out of time. When the camera stopped rolling, the room stayed completely still. Some staff members, who had served 3 monarchs, stood frozen in disbelief. This wasn't just the end of a king's rule. It felt like the end of an age. And something new was about to begin. While the news still echoed through Buckingham Palace, William and Catherine quietly walked into a private sitting room near the king's gallery. No aides, no cameras, just the two of them, sitting side by side, too stunned to speak. The future of the monarchy now rested on their shoulders. The air felt heavy with both history and shock. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Catherine whispered, "Are we ready for this?" Her voice shook. "The children, they're still so young." William didn't reply right away. He stared into the fire, jaw clenched, eyes lost in thought. He had always known this day would come, but not like this. Not with his father's voice still echoing in his ears. Not before his 50th birthday. He wasn't mourning the title. He was mourning the time they thought they still had. Later that evening, they gathered their 3 children in their private family space. There was no official tone, no royal words, just 2 parents on a couch, speaking to their kids. George sat up straight, sensing that something serious was happening. Charlotte leaned into Catherine for comfort, while little Louis fidgeted, unsure why everyone seemed so sad. "Grandpa is stepping down," William said gently. "And now, Mommy and I will have to take on more. A lot more. George frowned slightly, then nodded with a surprising calm. "I understand, Papa. I'll help you," he said, mature beyond his years. Charlotte reacted differently. Her lip trembled, and then tears rolled down her cheeks. Quiet tears, without complaint. It wasn't fear or anger. It was the heartbreak of a little girl realizing her world had suddenly changed. Her peaceful childhood had just grown a little shorter. Louis looked around, confused. "Why is everyone crying?" he asked softly, glancing at his brother and sister. Catherine pulled him close, whispering something only he could hear. That night, there were no royal tasks, no official meetings, just a family trying to hold each other close before everything changed. Catherine wrapped Charlotte in a blanket. William gave George an extra-long hug. Louis fell asleep, still asking questions. But why the sudden decision? Were there crises in the royal family? Let's find out. Royal rift behind the decision. For months, quiet worry hung in the air at Buckingham Palace. On the surface, everything looked normal, polished, and calm. But behind the scenes, whispers were growing louder. The king had missed events, looked tired after short walks, and sometimes seemed confused during briefings. To the public, King Charles still looked like a steady, strong leader. But inside the palace, people were starting to wonder, could he still do the job? The truth was known by his closest aides long before it was shared with the world. Charles had been diagnosed with cancer. At first, there was hope. Doctors had a treatment plan, and everyone wanted to believe it would work. But as the weeks went by, his health worsened. He lost weight, his hands sometimes trembled, and more events were suddenly cancelled. The palace released calm, carefully worded updates about rest and a lighter schedule. But those close to him saw what was really happening. The king was declining quickly. Behind closed doors, constitutional experts began quietly planning for the worst. What if the king couldn't go on, but refused to step down? Britain hadn't faced this kind of situation in modern times. Queen Elizabeth had ruled for 70 years, and the royal system wasn't built for dealing with serious illness in a reigning monarch. Strangely, it was Catherine, the Princess of Wales, who gave the family strength during this dark time. As she recovered from her own cancer battle, her calm return to public life stood in sharp contrast to Charles's weakening condition. Her courage and steady presence gave everyone hope, even Charles. Watching her fight made him think, maybe it was time for him to stop fighting and start letting go. Then came the moment that changed everything. A private doctor's visit at Windsor Castle brought a final, urgent warning. The stress of being king was making his illness worse. And if he continued, it could cost him his life. It wasn't advice, it was a clear line. That night, William and Catherine sat down with him. No cameras, no titles, just a father, a son, and a daughter-in-law. William spoke gently but firmly. "We need you alive more than we need you on the throne." Catherine added softly, "This isn't failure, it's wisdom." For the first time in weeks, Charles didn't argue. He just nodded. It wasn't giving up. It was a decision born from love, fear, and the quiet understanding that true legacy sometimes comes not from holding on, but from knowing when to step aside. The next morning, Britain woke to history. The sun rose over the River Thames, but the city felt different, quieter, heavier. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds began to gather. People of all ages stood together, holding flowers, newspapers, or simply standing in silence, trying to take in the news. The headlines said it all: "I can no longer serve as your king." On social media, emotions poured out. Two hashtags quickly took over: Save the King and William and Catherine. One reflected the sorrow of a nation losing a monarch, the other, the hope of a new beginning. Tribute videos, memes, and powerful side-by-side images spread online. Young Charles beside the older, frail king. Young William at Princess Diana's funeral, now standing tall beside Catherine, ready to lead. People weren't just sad, they were moved. Yes, there was grief for a king who waited his whole life for the crown, only to rule for a short time. But there was also hope that maybe this younger generation could bring new life to the monarchy. Polls showed just how deeply people felt. 78% said they were saddened by the king's illness, but an even greater number, 84%, supported William and Catherine stepping forward. This wasn't just sympathy anymore. It was trust, built over years of watching the couple handle crises with quiet strength. But how did this decision affect the children? Let's take a closer look. Royal life transition. The abdication didn't just change who held the title of king, it changed the lives of the children. Inside the quiet halls of Kensington Palace in Windsor, everything shifted. Royal tutors, etiquette coaches, and protocol experts were called in urgently. The Wales children weren't slowly introduced to royal life anymore, they were thrown into it. They were trained, taught, and closely watched. 12-year-old George carried the heaviest burden. He was no longer just the future heir, he had become the next in line. His days changed from regular schoolwork to lessons about the Constitution and how to act in public. He started asking serious questions that adults weren't ready for. "What do I say if someone bows to me?" he asked. "Will I ever be able to say no?" His tutors said he was polite and focused, but also weighed down, caring more than any child his age should. 10-year-old Charlotte became the steady one. When little Louis cried during lessons, she comforted him. When George drifted off into thought, she gently brought him back. She didn't get a formal title, but in their private world, she became the quiet protector, attentive, caring, and deeply loyal. For 7-year-old Louis, the change was the hardest. He didn't understand why everyone around him started whispering, or why his playtime had turned into formal greetings and curtsy practice. During one drill, he burst into tears and asked, "Can I still be little?" Catherine knelt beside him, hugged him tightly, and whispered, "Always." Catherine's own days grew longer. Between public appearances and private lessons, she went from being a mother to a queen in training. But she never let the crown take away her instincts. She still made time for bedtime stories, warm breakfasts, and holding their hands. Her strength wasn't in her title, it was in how steady she remained. Through all the pressure, the family only grew closer. What could have torn them apart brought them together. They laughed more, hugged longer, and made one rule clear: no royal talk at the dinner table. The world saw a family stepping into duty, but behind the scenes, it wasn't about rules or rituals, it was about love. And from that love, the next chapter of the monarchy quietly began to grow. It was a gray afternoon at Sandringham, the royal family's peaceful retreat. No press, no speeches. Just a close family called together by King Charles for what they somehow sensed would be a final, quiet moment. Not one of duty, but of love. Charles wasn't in royal robes. He sat by the window in a soft sweater and slacks. The fire behind him crackled gently. In that moment, far from the formal halls of Buckingham, he wasn't the king. He was just a father, a grandfather, and for once, that was enough. Louis came running in first, full of energy and innocence. Charles smiled, scooped him up, and they played. Blocks, cards, laughter. Nothing more, just pure joy, with no titles attached. George arrived next, more serious, watching carefully. Charles called him over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and quietly said, "You don't have to be perfect. Just be present. Just be kind." George nodded, thoughtful and determined, already carrying the quiet weight of leadership. Then Charlotte entered, calm and graceful. She said nothing, just hugged her grandfather tightly. He held her close for longer than usual and whispered, "Thank you. for looking after your brothers." Later, in the study, Charles called William alone. On the desk were two objects: his mother's ring and an old ceremonial quill once used by King George VI. Slowly and solemnly, he handed them to William, not just as treasured keepsakes, but as symbols. The heartbeat of the monarchy was now in new hands. Catherine came forward last. Her eyes were full but steady. She took Charles' hand and said softly, "We'll make you proud, Your Majesty." Charles smiled, truly smiled, and replied, "I can finally just be a grandfather." And that is enough. But was Catherine hoping to take the position of the Queen this early? Let's take a closer look. Catherine's shocking transformation. Catherine never thought she'd become Queen this soon. She had pictured many more years as the Duchess of Cambridge, supporting William, raising their children, and quietly working in the background. The idea of wearing the crown before she turned 50 had never crossed her mind. But now, here she was, stepping into history, not with loud celebration, but with quiet strength. Her journey had already been tested in ways few could imagine. Facing cancer had pushed her beyond anything royal life could prepare her for. In those quiet hospital rooms and difficult days of recovery, she found something deeper than bravery. She found purpose. That same strength would now guide her through one of the most public and demanding roles in the world. But Catherine wasn't just following tradition. She was changing it. Behind the scenes, she started working with advisors to update royal rules, not for show, but for the future her children would live in. She wanted less formality, more honesty. A monarchy that didn't stand above the people, but stood beside them. And people noticed. In just a short time, the public began calling her not just the future queen, but the people's queen. This wasn't about titles, it was about trust. Her grace, kindness, and quiet dignity through sickness and change became a symbol of something new. To many, Catherine wasn't just wearing a crown, she was guiding the way. And always by her side, though rarely in the spotlight, was her mother. Carol Middleton, always calm and supportive, became the steady hand behind the scenes. She helped with the children, kept things running at home, and gave Catherine the grounding that no royal expert ever could. Those close to the family say Carol often reminded her daughter, "You were a mother before you were a monarch. Don't forget that." And Catherine hasn't. Even as she prepares for big royal events and global responsibilities, she still finds time to braid Charlotte's hair, quiz George on schoolwork, or cuddle Louis during meetings. She wears the crown, but she carries her children. Queen by duty, mother by heart. That's the real change. Catherine didn't become someone else. She simply revealed the strong, caring woman she's always been. A queen who didn't seek power, but became the country's greatest hope. A new chapter of royalty, born not from tradition, but from crisis. When everything settled and the news cycle moved on, the monarchy wasn't broken, it was renewed. King Charles's decision to step down didn't weaken the crown, it redefined it. For the first time in modern memory, a king gave up the throne, not because of scandal or pressure, but out of love. He chose his family over his title. And by doing so, he may have done more for the future of the monarchy than anyone before him. Charles will be remembered not for how long he ruled, but for the strength it took to step away. He chose time with his grandchildren over ceremony. He gave up power, and in doing so, showed true wisdom. In a world where power is everything, his decision to let go became the most powerful move of all. Now William is king, not in the way many expected, but shaped by crisis and responsibility. He didn't step into power through celebration, but through necessity. He had to rise earlier than planned for his family and the country. And that rise has already changed how people see the royal family. Beside him, Catherine has become more than just a queen. She's a calming presence, a symbol of warmth and strength, and a glimpse of what the monarchy could be: human, modern, and devoted. A woman who didn't chase the crown but earned the nation's heart through loyalty and love. Through illness, change, and motherhood, she remained steady. And in doing so, she became the soul of the new royal era. As for the children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, they are growing up in a world that saw their family do something truly rare. One day, they'll read about how their grandfather stepped aside, and their parents stepped up. So, what are your thoughts on King Charles's sudden decision to pass the throne to Prince William and Catherine? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.